have security, so we have opportunity, and we have Bitcoin.
We are making Bitcoin legal tender, and we are trying to be independent from America, from all those institutions.
I know that El Salvador won't be the last country using Bitcoin. It's just the first one.
Bitcoin is good for business.
We know our history, so we know what we have suffered.
I will do that even if I don't get paid at all till I'm dead.
To tell the United States, we are not going to do your rules because we have done it in the past and it didn't work.
You're the first Salvadorian Bitcoin podcast with Bitcoin.
Bitcorner.
Bitcorner. Nice. When did you started it, and then like why did it kick off for you?
Yeah, so I started actually. This month is the first anniversary of Bitcoiner podcast, and I started because when Bukele made it legal tender, Bitcoin legal tender, I was super excited. I knew Bitcoin because of my studies, and later we can go deep dive into it. But when I saw that, I thought in that moment that there was going to be like a lot of content about Bitcoin in El Salvador. There were all these news about the adoption, and I heard that there was a lot of education there. Little by little, that yes, it is true. There's a lot of education, but it's happening smoothly. It's not like uh, what people thought that it was going to be at the beginning, like with the chivo that the government was giving $30 to every Salvadorian citizens to have Bitcoin, and instantly people will know how to use it. That wasn't the case because as people knew later, chivo wasn't that good. It needs a lot of improvements. So it was KYC. So uh, people barely knew about Bitcoin. Actually, still today, there are some people that think that Bitcoin is something related to the government, something that Bukele made, and that's not true. So uh, we need a lot of education, and most of the educations or most of the content about Bitcoin are in English. So even the first news that we hear about, mostly everything is in English. So there are good Bitcoiners that speak in Spanish that are in Latin America. Actually, I have some friends that are from South America and now are living in El Salvador, and they create a good content. But still, even them create their own content in Spanish, but still they work for English companies. So as you can perceive now, there's a lot of lack of educational content in Spanish. And I was thinking that there was going to be, like TV shows about Bitcoins or podcasters or whatever, or YouTubers, uh, but it didn't happen. And I was so enthusiastic about Bitcoin that I started talking about my family that also use Bitcoin and know about Bitcoin, and some friends, and they told me like, "You should do it," and I was like, "Yeah, why not? I'm gonna do it." And but my idea still was how can you solve this problem, because even though the people that I used to and still watch or listen on podcasts or YouTube, everything is basically in English. So I thought that, okay, I want to make the show that mostly I consume, and that I will like my people, Salvadorans will like, and we will start in simple terms. And even if the guest is in English, I'm going to subtitle. I'm going to subtitle by myself with of course the help of AI, because if not, it's impossible. And that's how I did. So I started to invite some people and to start a podcast, and then I started subtitle that, and little by little, with word of mouth, I knew other Bitcoiners that also were good Bitcoiners that were working in El Salvador, even Salvadorians, and that's how I started to find out that there are content in Spanish that are good content in Spanish, but they just need to some source where they can be here, even in English and in Spanish. So that's when it hit me, and I was like, okay, so I'm doing this kind of content in English with the Spanish subtitles, but I also am going to do it vice versa, so I'm going to do the podcast with Salvadorians or Spanish speakers, but I'm not going to tell them, okay, let's speak in English so we can spread the word, because it's, everyone speaks English. I'm going to do it in Spanish because we speak Spanish, but I'm going to do it vice versa. I'm going to subtitle in English, and that's how I play it. So my podcast does the kind of differentiation, that if it is in English, you'll get Spanish subtitles, and if it is Spanish, you will get English subtitles, and that's a way that you can close the bridge. So that's how I started.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I think with AI now we are really, it's really like if you go back like 10 years, everybody had to do their own transcript. There was podcasts where somebody just wrote down what they are saying and stuff like that. This is not like, you don't have to do that anymore. This is we talked earlier about Riverside. It's so easy now. They're giving you the transcript, they're giving you a summary of everything. And I think if we are moving out like another 10, 20, 30 years, I think it does not matter which language you are doing the podcast in, because it will be auto translated on all the platforms with AI in real time in your voice, and you will just speak Hindi, you will speak German, you will speak Spanish, you will speak English, you will speak every language. And the listener will just like, oh, I have my YouTube app, I will consume everything in German, I will consume everything in Spanish, and everything will be translated anyways. I think language now is still very, very important, but I think it will be less and less important over time as the
Mhm.
world moves closer and closer together. Yeah, so
Mhm.
that was just for me like 2 cents on language. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but I'm
Yeah.
really, I'm really interested in El Salvador. I had already a few guests on that were from other parts in the world and moved to El Salvador.
Uh-huh.
And I actually had people from Bitcoin Berlin on that were from
Hmm.
El Salvador. There was like this one guy who founded it, and he was always from El Salvador, but he moved to Bitcoin Berlin. And the other guy, Charlie, he was from London and moved to El Salvador. So you are my second person, I think, that is actually born in El Salvador. How is the adoption there actually going?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, actually, I spoke a couple of weeks ago with the guys, the team that are from Bitcoin Berlin, and we were discussing about that. So yeah, they they told me, and from what I know, because before starting recording, I told you that my parents were here, so we were discussing about this, and the adoption is continuing but slowly. So there are a lot of educational Bitcoin schools or institutions that are working on that. It's happening slowly, mostly in the capital, like in San Salvador. Of course, Bitcoin Beach, that it's El Sonte, and that are spreading in some parts around the capital, little by little. So that's why my first Bitcoin, my primer Bitcoin, I working so hard on it. Actually, I don't know if you know that last year they made this deal, this partnership with the government. So they are going to work with public schools. They're going to start teaching their program, the Mi Primer Bitcoin program, in the schools. And so I think that's super nice because the future, of course, are the kids. So they're securing the future. They're doing really good, some good basis for the future of El Salvador. But there's also a lack of Bitcoin education in the all the the workers, the small businesses, like a small shop in the community or whatever. So that's where actually Bitcoin Berlin is working on. They moved to Berlin. That's why they're doing this educational project there, and they started to go to small businesses. And they also told me that they started talking about Bitcoin. But of course, if you go like, "Hey, have you ever heard about Bitcoin?" They're like, "Okay, this is a scam. They're trying to sell me something." No. So actually, the approach to do the good approach to the way to talk about Bitcoin is just using it. Like you go, you buy something to them, and they say, "Do you accept Bitcoin?" And they say yes or no. And if they say no, you say, "Why?" And they tell you because it's too complicated, because uh, nobody came there before to explain them how it works. So that's how you do it. You go, you try to buy something, and you say, "Okay, I'm going to explain to you use Bitcoin. It's super easy. Just download this non KYC, wallet, uh, pick one randomly, or if you happens that you have Chivo installed, but nobody told you how to use it, I'm going to show you how to use it. It's super easy. You just show them how to use it. You pay for it, and that's it. And that's how it is happening. So it is happening smoothly, little by little. But as I mentioned, there are some projects that are working on right now in El Salvador, and but yeah, we still need more education about it. Even that's why Mi Primer Bitcoin exists. That's why my podcast exists. That's why Bitcoin really exists. We just need more Bitcoiners, no matter if you speak in English or Spanish, but that you go to El Salvador and just uh, start using it as the way it is, to help people that they don't have banking system. Just go to a small shop, try to buy something. If you visit El Salvador, you will see many stores that they say accept Bitcoin, and even if you don't see those, just go try to consume, buy something, and ask them. And if you can help them, Salvadorians are open to always to listen. They are very friendly, so it's really rarely that they will say no. They are open to listen. Yeah.
It's an interesting spot where you are because you, as you said, you knew Bitcoin before Nayib Bukele adopted the Bitcoin standard for like El Salvador, right?
Mhm.
So, how was that feeling when you, like, I assume you were a Bitcoiner in 2021. How was that feeling? You are an El Salvadorian person. You were born there, and then all of a sudden the leader comes out, and you are convinced of that Bitcoin idea, and all of a sudden the leader comes out and says like, "Oh yeah, we are making Bitcoin legal tender, and we are trying to be independent from America, from all those institutions." How is that? How's that feeling? Like, how did you see that news coming, and did it surprise you?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, yeah, I think when that happened, it was 2021, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So it
2021
was in the
was.
middle of COVID. Yeah, so it was in the middle of COVID. So yeah, actually I started to listen about Bitcoin in 2017 because I'm an engineer. So uh, I studied it in the university, but more in the in terms of blockchain and how it works. So uh, you know the term blockchain is super boring, and it's not that good in terms of engineering because the process is super slow. But I mean, I get it. It's a way to have it how all the data well structured and open and etc. So by 2017, I wasn't that um, interested about Bitcoin. But then it happens that like a few years later, I started to talking about Bitcoin like by pure chance with my sister. I remember we were in a park, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but she mentioned Bitcoin, and she's not an engineer; she is a business administrator, and she was talking about Bitcoin. She told me that she was talking about Bitcoin with my dad, and my dad is a doctor. So I was like, when I was having this conversation, I was thinking like, okay, so my dad is a doctor, my sister is a business administrator, and I'm an engineer. So something's going on because the three of us are from different fields, and the three of us are interested in Bitcoin, you know. And so yeah, we discussed about that, and that's when my curiosity started. It could say that it was my aha moment. of that I wanted to learn deeper about Bitcoin, and that's what I did. And that's what I actually did in COVID, like learning super deep. And then yeah, I heard the news about Bukele saying about this. And I think it's super interesting because what was going on in that moment is that he declared the war to the guns. So they were saying that okay, we're going to clean the street. That there's enough of this bloodbath. We have been suffering a lot, and so we're going to fight against them, and we're going to fight against corruption. So that's what he did, and. So when he has the idea of adopting Bitcoin, for me, for my personal opinion, it was super brave and super smart because it was a way um, declare the war not just the gang members, but also the elites. To tell like the exterior, the United States, on all this government that uh, we are not going to do your rules because we have done it in the past and it didn't work. Actually, it was the opposite, and we know how America works. That they need to go to wars because their money is based on nothing, so they just go to wars and do that, and that's basically how it also works. The debt in Latin America, they loan money, but by their own terms, and that's how basically they have some control in Latin America. So that's what also happened in El Salvador. So El Salvador, it was a poor country, still is a poor country, but it's increasing. The economy is improving, but Bukele said, like, okay, we're going to do it in our own ways. So we have this tool that we have seen in this small community that it worked. It was a pure community. They didn't have anything like clean water, electricity. It was El Sonte was just known for surfer because it's actually we have good waves in El Salvador. But beyond that, it was but that time El Sante was just a small beach for surfers, and they have like these small villas, but super simple, where you can go and spend a night, or the small bars, but the simplest as possible, made of out of wood. uh, but yeah, so the months passed, and they have been using Bitcoin, and they have increased their, not just their small economy, but their livings. They were increasing, how they live, in terms of they have somehow money to save and to use it in the community. uh, and of course, because it's a very wise man. He has, Max Kaiser as this person that he's helping him in everything related to Bitcoin. Of course, Samson Mount helped him. So there are smart people around him, and he saw what happened in El Sonte. Uh, so by that moment, when he announced that he was going to adopt Bitcoin, I thought that was a smart move, and I kind of thought that it was doing it because of this. Because otherwise, if you play by the rules of American with the fiat system, it wouldn't change at all. So he found out that this tool can help to be independent and to uh, declare the war and clean everything in El Salvador, and somehow exit this system that we have been using in the past and it never worked, and now we are adopting Bitcoin with this new system, and that's how this increased for me and my family. Was like, okay, he's doing a smart move, and we are really excited and see how it goes. And the time passed, and we have seen what happened in El Salvador.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating for me that Nayib Bukele is in El Salvador, seemingly. Like, I'm in Austria, like I don't see what's actually going on in El Salvador, but from everything I see, he's really popular in the with the people, and this is something completely uncommon in Austria and in German, at least in this time. And it's weird for me to have such great acceptance rates also, and rates that are like so clear that as Nayib Bukele is like the leader of El Salvador, and he was also just now re-elected. When this comes out, it has been a few weeks, and how like do actually the people in El Salvador view him that positively, and what are the maybe the critics saying about him? Is there like I can imagine if there are like opposite parties also and there are opposite candidates, of course there will be some critics also of him. What are they saying about him? And is it true that the Nayib Bukele is such popular person in El Salvador?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, he's very popular. Uh, I don't know if you have seen the metrics, but outside El Salvador, uh, the ones that we voted around the world, he got 97% of the, yeah. So it
Wow.
was super. Yeah, so it's incredible, and that's Europe, United States, and Asia. So
And that's
yeah, it's
interesting because I just wanted to like quickly say that because in
yeah,
Europe, especially in Germany and in Austria, we get a lot of bad news about Nayib Bukele. Like outside
really.
of the Bitcoin world, like when you are in Bitcoin Twitter and stuff like that, I only see good news. But when I see in the mainstream media, especially those that are paid from the government, it's like the cool dictator Nayib Bukele, a really big media outlet in Germany, financed by the German government, said that in an article with the re-election. So it's interesting for me to see that the people that live in Europe and have this reverse propaganda about Nayib that he's like a dictator and he's so rude to everyone with the gangs, and this is actually something that is heard in the mainstream media, but I guess nobody consumes them anymore because everybody knows that they,
Yeah.
they're talking shit. At least I think so. And so it's a really interesting stat that like such a high amount actually want him outside, and so but also inside. Like in El Salvador, he also got really good votes, right?
Yeah, he got 87%, I think. Yeah. So far, I think it's not official yet because they are still counting. I think maybe today they will have the final metrics. Of course, when this is released, we'll have the official statistics. But yeah, it was like 87%. So that's huge. I think the last president that got the most voted impressively was Joe Biden with 88%. No, sorry, 58%. I think in the United States. Yeah, yeah. So that's something unusual, but yeah, he's quite popular and people love it. I mean, I don't know how much people know the story about Salvador and it's too long to tell it just in a podcast, but I'm going to resume and give you a long story short. But I invite all the people that watch this podcast to uh, do your own research about the story of Salvador. It's quite fascinating, sad, and it's been tough the past years, even before I was born, but yeah, we had a civil war in the 80s, and then in the 90s we had the consequences of the of that war, the civil war. So the gangs member are actually a consequence about that. And so yeah, we switched from one war to another one that actually was worse. For a long time we thought that civil war, because it was actually a war like we see in what's going on right now in Russia and Ukraine and other parts of the world, it was like that. But the thing is that the war against the gangs member was different because it was mostly between them and then with the civilians. But the thing is that the civilians, of course, they weren't at war; they were just living their life. So little by little, they were gaining power, and they gained power because uh, before Bukele, we had two governments. First, the righties, and then the lefties. The righties were uh, Arena, the mostly Arena. It's conformed with, the basically the elites, people that are have huge businesses, that, that they have even their own enterprises in the United States, or work with huge businesses in the United States. And so they rule by 20 years, or no, hold on, yeah, I don't know, yeah, maybe 20 years, I don't know, yeah, I think so. And but they were so corrupt with that. And then that's how the gang member gained some power. But then the left, because we were exhausted about all the corruption, then the left said, okay, we have the solution, let's give the power to the people. Because the left was basically, there was a party that was made for teachers, philosophers, doctors, etc. So or like journalists. And actually, our first journalist was, sorry, our first president in the leftist side was Mauricio Funes, that he used to be a famous journalist in El Salvador. And he came like, and he was very popular at that time. People loved him at that time. So he won the election, and he said that, okay, we're going to solve the problems that El Salvador have or had in that moment. But it happened that it was they were doing the same thing. They just came to power, and to be corrupt, they just rob money and continue being corrupted with the gang members. And actually, I think that they facilitated the way they spread their uh, all the drugs and everything in El Salvador. Meanwhile, in that time, Bukele, he got the this is he was the uh, I don't know how to say this in English, but the one that rules a small community. How do you say this? Like a
Uh,
small town,
Village.
like the mayor. The mayor. No, it's the mayor.
Oh,
He was the mayor.
mayor of the village. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was the mayor of Nuevo Cuscatlan, and he was doing like good stuff there. He was cleaning all these violence that they were there. He was improving in education. He was building some parks, and he was doing a small projects, artistic projects, so kids can go there and not just to join a gang, so they can do something productive. Uh, and people of Nuevo Catlan at that time, they were super happy with Bukele. Then he rolled to be a mayor in San Salvador, the capital, and he won. But of course, there were critics that it's not the same to rule as a small town that the capital. But actually, he made it, and he made it super well. So then he ruled to the presidency. And of course, there were the same critics that it's not the same to rule the entire country, that just the capital. But still he did. But so when he ruled to president the first time, he has this idea to create Nuevas Ideas, that is the his party. But I don't remember exactly what happened, but he couldn't rule with Nuevas Ideas. But that time, I think they did everything so he couldn't rule with Nuevas Ideas. So he ruled with another party, but still he won. And then it came after that. It came Nuevas Ideas, because they found Nuevas Ideas for the parliament, and that's how that started. And Nuevas Ideas, mainly for the people that don't know, are made with people of my age, millennials, or Gen Z, people that saw everything that was going on in El Salvador, that we grew in violence, that we saw basically our entire life suffering and violence. We have seen our families go to United States, or Europe, escaping from that violence. Or so yeah, that's how Nova City was founded, with people that they just wanted to do something different, because we have seen that uh, no matter if it was Arena or FMLN, the two parties, that's like the equivalent in the United States, Democrats or Republicans, was the same. So that's how it started. And little by little, Bukele was pretty famous, because but that time when he was president, because people have seen what he was doing in this and in Nuevo Cuscatlan and then in the capital. So people, by that time, they were already satisfied with him, So he was very popular, and then it came, of course, I think the major criticism about Bukele, that the media and the government says that he's a dictator or not, is because the measures that he's doing in the way that he is fighting against the gangs member. That it is that if you see someone with a tattoo, they go to jail. Actually, that's not how it works, because the gang members, they all of them have tattoos, but they have the tattoo of the gangs that they belongs. So, but there's a twist, because if you have those tattoos, it implies that, for what I know, that you have robbed, killed, and kidnapped someone in the past. Because I think it's that the ritual that they do. So they, of course, are already criminals. So um, it was basically so easy for Bukele, because he just had to search for the people that has the tattoos. Like, okay, you're a criminal, so go to jail. It's not that you have, like, I don't know, like. Um a tattoo of a lion, of a flower, you go to jail. No, that's not like that. Or a dolphin. No, it's not like that. Uh, so basically, it's about that. And as I mentioned before, the elites and the governments that are empowered, they don't want the violence stops, because uh, that's how they get money, right? Doing some work. But no, people in El Salvador are actually really happy with him. Even in the outside El Salvador, we're really happy, because we know our history, so we know what we have suffered, and we have seen the improvements. So that's why he's so popular.
I'm super excited to announce that this podcast got the first ever sponsor. 21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self custody. This is my go to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. Yeah, I think it's also fascinating that the murder rate is going down, and it's came from one of the worst to one of the best murder rates. It's like a really safe country now. I had I had people on that live in El Salvador, where they moved in 2021 there, and back then they said almost every store had guards of their own, and slowly they watched that the guards in front of the stores got less and less, and even almost no guards at all at some stores. And this got better and better with every step of the way. And those are just some small metrics you can look at. Oh, murder rate is falling, guards are less, people can finally let their sons and daughters out and play without having to, like, oh shit, what happens when someone stabs them to death? Like, this is like it obviously, when you live in a country where there is extreme violence, it needs extreme measurements to go against those extreme violence. And I think a lot of people in Germany, Austria, is like in this Western Hemisphere, also in America, they cannot imagine that, because they don't have that kind of violence in their countries. I don't know how it's in America actually, but Austria, Germany is really peaceful. Like if something happens, everybody talks about it, but it rarely something happens actually. Um, so I think this is what a lot of people maybe don't understand. If you have such an extreme situation with such a high murder rate, you have to put some extreme measurements. And with the tattoos, it's so easy also. I don't know the whole gang history and if everyone has it and stuff like that, but I assume it is like that. And yeah, and I think El Salvador is also unique because it's like a kind of window of a Bitcoin standard. How will a Bitcoin standard look like? And you're now in Spain, right?
Yeah.
And will you like, do you have plans like when you like, do you lift them back to El Salvador? Are you moving back? What's your plan for living in El Salvador?
Yeah, so because of the podcast, most of the people that are interviewed on Salvador, or as it happened to you, that people that were here in Europe or in the United States are moving back to El Salvador. So yeah, personally, yeah, I want to move, but not immediately because there's a lot of things to do. But I want to do it by seasons, so like spend like 3 months there, and to enjoy the good weather because right now, for example, right now it's a good timing because we're in winter and in El Salvador it's summer right now. Uh, but I also want to enjoy all the Bitcoin conference because United States is super close, so we can go to Pacific Bitcoin and the Bitcoin conference that happened there, also our own conference that happens there, and also the ones that are in South America. So that's, I think, my plan. I go for seasons, stay there like 3 months, 4 months, and then moving back. So yeah, because I also love here, and I have friends and family here. So it's hard to balance, and I have the blessed that also my parents come here a lot. So yeah, I think personally, when my parents don't come here, I will go there and spend some time and doing my podcast there. Maybe do it in person with the guests that usually do it like us here virtually. But yeah, just go to El Salvador because I know several Salvadorans, even friends, that they're thinking to go back. Then when you hear, personally, I have friends that I remember that we had this talk like way before, like 5 years ago, and we're thinking like, are you coming? Are you going back? Uh, and at any point of your life, and she was super secure, and she said like, no. Of course, we were talking before everything that happened, and last year I think we had this conversation, and I asked the same question, and she told me like, yeah, absolutely, I'll thinking about it. I don't know if I'm moving, but I'll, just like me, like go for season, or staying here, sorry, or staying there on definitely, because I think her work remotely, so she can manage somehow. But so yeah, but that's what the effect of Salvador, and uh, it's what we are thinking, because it's safe enough. Actually, El Salvador is a beautiful country. It's super beautiful. We have a lot of nature, and the people are so friendly. So the only thing that we didn't have, it was the security. So by that time, people were thinking like, if they were entrepreneurs or they want to be freelancers or to build their own small businesses, they were thinking, okay, I'm going to put my business, but why? If they will come up a gang member and put me, they will charge me with, well, in El Salvador it's called renta, and renta was they were extorting you to pay some money. So they were like, okay, better I will not doing it. But now we have security, so we have opportunity, and we have Bitcoin. So we have security, and we have a financial tool that it can help us to improve. So yeah, it's a good timing to go to El Salvador.
I also think it's an amazing sign also for El Salvador that people that lived there, moved out, said that they don't want to move back, they want to stay there, and then all of a sudden, a lot of things are happening, and they are like reconsidering moving back to El Salvador. It's a great metric to see how amazing El Salvador is doing on a Bitcoin standard. And I always say Bitcoin is good for business, no matter if it's a personal business like yourself, is good if you have Bitcoin. It's good for actual business if you're a company putting on a balance sheet, making advertisement with it, whatever. And it's also seemingly good for countries, and that's the whole game theory about. And I'm curious now about how do you see Bitcoin? How is Bitcoin a success in 20 years? Like if you look in out in like 10, 20 years, um, how does Bitcoin look that you are saying, oh, Bitcoin is actually a success? It's a success story. Are we accepting in every store? Are we using it in medium of exchange? Is it the whole unit of account thing? What do you see Bitcoin succeeding at?
In El Salvador, right? Or do you mean in
Yeah,
general?
in El Salvador, but I think also like maybe it's more in all the countries, but yeah, especially in El Salvador.
So I think in 20 years, I think it will be. Uh, I can bet, and we can see what happened in 20 years. We will rewatch this episode, but yeah, I can bet that mostly um, the entire country will be using Bitcoin. I think because the as I mentioned, the adoption is happening slowly, but it's happening and it's spreading little by little. And more companies are are moving actually to El Salvador. Um, to to develop their own businesses there. It's quite easier. They want to live in a Bitcoin standard, uh, because it's way easier to do basically everything and to not depend on the dollars and inflation and the banks. You can have your own money, and I think you will feel that it's yours, so it's yours. And Salvadorians, as I mentioned, there everyone is open to listen about Bitcoin. They just there's so the thing is that right now we don't have enough people that are giving education. Still, there are a lot of institutions, but we need still more people educating about Bitcoin. But when that happens in 20 years, it's a long period. We will see access in El Salvador, and I think that we will see people using it as any other currency. Like right now, we have dollars and Bitcoin, but before that, we had colones. It was our currency and dollars. So I think that people will be using it as easy as we can use it as the dollar or the colon in the past. Because again, right now, and as I told you before, they're securing the future with the schools, and the kids are the future. So if and of course they know the technology way better than we used to. And of course our generation, our parents felt that we were so used to use the computers even back then they were so easy. But I think it's the same in the same way they're doing it with Bitcoin. And I know that Bitcoin by that time in 20 years it won't be El Salvador won't be the only country that it will be using it as legal tender. There are right now, while we speak, countries that are planning to use Bitcoin as a legal tender. I know people from Jantry that they told me that they were in several countries in Latin America, or countries not necessarily Latin America, but countries that have high inflation, and they are doing everything in their power to help them. And of course, in those countries that they have high inflation, there are of course Bitcoin educational institutions that are own their owns, and that are working to somehow escape from that hyperinflation. So I know that El Salvador won't be the last country using Bitcoin. It's just the first one.
Yeah, it will trickle down to every county eventually. It's we're at this point where we can confidently say it's inevitable, it will come, and we it's like watching last night's game with knowing who won, and it's Bitcoin, and it's still a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, of course.
um,
It's just,
um, you made a lot of podcasts already. Like you have, as you said, I think the 1 year anniversary for your Bitcoin podcast. And you also had like a really cool guests on, bigger ones, smaller ones, all over the place. So you know a lot about Bitcoiners in general. What would you say are those main learnings you had, or did you learn something new from interviewing so many Bitcoiners and getting the different kind of perspectives on Bitcoin into it? Like, what were your learnings from the Bitcoin podcast?
yeah, so that's a good question. Actually, when I started the podcast, I wanted to do a podcast that I wanted to consume, and hopefully the viewers will also love it. And little by little, I was uh, so first I want to shout out actually to Julian Linegar, that he's the CEO of Relay, and Natalie Brunel and Lina Seyr. They were my very first guests in the podcast, and thanks to them, that's how I started. So I'm very grateful with them. Um, so yeah, so the idea of the podcast, it was to have big personalities like, like Jeff Booth, Natalie Smolensky, because they know a lot about Bitcoin. Precisely, we need their education, their own project, their own thesis in our language, because we need that people know about this thing that is happening about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is, as you know, is way deeper. It's not just a currency that we can use. It's a whole thing. So uh, you start learning about those things when you go deeper. And the main idea of the show is to have those personalities, but also have small communities or small Bitcoin educational programs like Bitcoin Berlin, that they are just starting, or Mi Primer Bitcoin, that are the ones that are leading the Bitcoin education in El Salvador, and or even not necessarily from El Salvador, but from Latin America, that maybe they are, I don't know, freelancers, or they are TikTokers, or they just have a good story about Bitcoin that happened in Latin America thanks to Bitcoin, and like to have all these kind of voices in different areas of perspective of lives. So you can see that a huge company like MicroStrategy are adopting Bitcoin, and they're doing what they're doing. They have this program, and you know, or even Max Kaiser, that is building with Gerson Martini this volcano energy. There's going to be this fascinating miner company that will work in El Salvador using volcano energy, or even people from South America that they know stories about small communities that are using Bitcoin, and but they didn't have bank services, but now they somehow, because someone just randomly about Bitcoin to them, they now are using it for their small businesses, and now they somehow has this tool that where they can save some money. And so yeah, I'm learning a lot, and I don't know if I have like a specific topic about it, but it's super fascinating. And I think the blessing of us, like being podcasters, is that in every single episode we learn something new, even something that you haven't prepared or heard before, or even in the during the conversation you hear something that was like, okay, I didn't know about that, and you go deeper. And I think that's the beauty of Bitcoin, that you just go deeper and deeper. And I think this is like, for me, it's super fun, and thank God I can live and do this for I can do the podcast for my living, because I'm learning, I'm enjoying it. And I also know that me and you and all the podcasters and everyone that make content about Bitcoin, we're providing good education, and people are learning what we are learning. So no, the listeners are not just the ones that are learning, we also learning. So I think it's a blessing to do this.
Yeah, it's definitely something amazing. And uh, fascinating for me is also when you talk with guests, they are bringing their own views and their own beliefs in the podcast, and you are learning about so many different perspectives on different subjects, even going beyond Bitcoin, and also news things, like if there's something new coming up. I learned so much on the Bitcoin podcast that it's crazy. I always had the feeling, oh, I have to research more about Bitcoin. I want to do learn about this and that, and it's kind of like, oh, my podcast that I do actually is right now one of the biggest sources of education for myself. I still try to read books, to read through Twitter, read through the news, read through everything. But the podcast, it's like I do the podcast now every day. and I publish 5 times a week, and I want to publish like every single day a podcast. That's my goal, to have like every single day one podcast out. And if you have 1 hour every day where you listen to someone in the sphere that tells you what they are thinking about the topics, and you researched before about them, so you can ask specific questions to them, and then afterwards you have to edit it, you have to look through it, you have to clip things out, you learn that topic that the guest brings in such a deep fashion that it's fascinating for me. And I'm a conversational guy. Like when I speak about something, I learn it really quickly. If I just hear it, it's harder. If I just read it, it's harder. If I have it in a conversation and I speak about it, it sticks with me for a very long time. Like if I speak about something, I know it then. So
Yeah,
for me, it's
absolutely.
I will do that even if I don't get paid at all till I'm dead.
Absolutely. And actually, what you were saying is that that's something that I also focus on my podcast, because even it's a Bitcoin educational podcast, because we need education. Um, I also, I like to hear the backstory. So I think in my podcast, like half of it is about the person, because I think that's something that I have learned in life basically, that you can resonate with another person if you know their story, because it's not the same that just comes someone randomly and talk about something that even it's education or funny or whatever. But if you have stories that can resonate with you, you know the person, so you just know what they're thinking, why they and what they are doing it. That is that, in the end, is not that they're not here just because. No, they have a reason, and the reason is their backstory, what they have uh, been doing, what they have been suffering, of what they have, any experience that they have in life, positive or negative. They have something to tell, and somehow they have found something in Bitcoin that there is this tool that can allow them to express in whatever way, that about their lives, of what they're doing. So yeah, it's super fascinating.
Yeah, and also the point that you have and concentrated, a focused conversation with another human being over an hour, where there is no phone, there is no other friends, there is no waitress coming and giving you something in between. There's nothing there. There's just two people staring each other, and they know they are being watched afterwards, so they have to be focused, they have to be right here in the moment, and they're talking with each other. And it's um, alone for that, I would do it, even if it's not recorded, because it's not working if it's not recorded, because then the focus is not as hard here. And that's a fascinating thing for me, podcasting in itself. I can highly recommend to everybody, just do it, even if you don't want to do it, even if you just do it once a month, even if you just do it like every second month, because this one conversation with those people will bring you further ahead. Yeah, it's fascinating for me. But
Absolutely.
we are having an end routine in the podcast, because we are already so far with the time. It's fascinating how fast the time is always moving. The previous guest asked a question for the next guest, without knowing who's the next guest actually is. Sometimes they ask me, sometimes I tell them I should not. But the previous guest did not know, like he does not know that you are my next guest. And the question is a very technical one. I usually get like general questions, then sometimes I get funny questions, sometimes I get related questions. Like it's all over the place. And this question was a really technical one, but there's actually a movie about that
Oof.
coming out also, a really controversial one even. And it's a question from Chris from Cedar, and he posted that question on his accounts, and 61% had like an answer that was actually wrong. And I think it's an interesting thought experiment also to go through. and he asked, can every Satoshi be traced back to its originating block? Like, is it possible to
Mm.
see if you have a Satoshi, can you go back to the whole originating block?
I think yeah, you can do that. You can
Yeah, and
trace that.
yeah, it's actually fascinating because I thought so too for a long period of time.
And it's
And
not.
it's actually like sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot, because you can have like multiple inputs with the UTXOs. And the thing is that you cannot guarantee, like it's like a tree where you have
Mm-hmm.
inputs and you have trees and they're going in different routes, and you cannot
Mm-hmm.
know for sure if that Satoshi is coming from that. Like there can be so many ways that you cannot know for sure. I mean, obviously that's the whole thing of coin analysis, because you want to see, okay, where is this coin coming from, and then there's coin joins that try to
Mm-hmm.
make so many inputs. They're trying to make so many confusions in a transaction that you cannot break it. And I mean, there are the beliefs that no matter how many coin joins you do, sometimes you can break it. And we have examples of coin joins being broken and being moved back. But this was basically his answer. I'm not a software
Oh.
developer. I'm not really deep in. I'm actually a software developer, but I'm not so deep in the Bitcoin code. So those questions and those thought experiments are always interesting for me, and something I also have to look way deeper into it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you know what? I answer yeah because I had some similar conversation with some friends last year, but we were talking about what is the name of this thing that they were trying to do or still trying to do, that they want to do to attach JPEG with every Satoshi. I don't remember the name of
Or the
this thing.
ordinals, you mean?
Yeah, the ordinals. Yeah. So there's a whole discussion about that, and we were discussing about it. And they kind of knew about this, and they were talking about that. Yeah, you can trace somehow because they say, but I don't know if it is true because I never did my own research. But I just thought it was super curious that they told me that. Uh, and I don't remember how it was related to ordinals, but they told me that there's some, because right now there are a lot of a lot of Bitcoin and satoshis in the network, spread and induced and going back and forward. That probably some of the satoshis that you have or any other person have belongs. They were used the by Satoshi Nakamoto, and they were called like rare Satoshis, because maybe he did a transaction. These transactions go to other transactions, and right now we have made like billions of transactions of Bitcoin. So of course, it's like the lottery that you have this rare Satoshi. It can happen or it cannot, but you can have this rare Satoshi that maybe Satoshi Nakamoto made his own transaction. But I don't know if that's true or not, because again, it was just a conversation with the friends and I didn't make my own research. So maybe someone know about this, leave it in the comments, make a discussion, because I don't know.
That's
Yeah.
also important always to say, like it's uh, nobody in Bitcoin knows everything about Bitcoin, and that's the beauty of it. And everyone is on their own learning journey. And I sometimes post about really beginner questions on my Twitter, especially when it was like on Reddit and there was a big discussion about it. I'm like reposting it from Reddit and making my own comments about it. And I think we always have to be really inclusive about everything. I try to make also the podcast so that someone that just stumbled upon the podcast in the first like rabbit hole sphere and entry, that he can still watch it and can still enjoy it and can still go further down the rabbit hole. I don't want a technical podcast or like really deep into that level where like only 1% of all the Bitcoiners even understand it. That's also interesting and fun, and there are podcasts out there. But I want to make a podcast for people to listen to, that they can rely on. If there's some different difficult topic, I will ask for explanation for it. I had something on lightning a few weeks ago, and I asked so many beginner questions I knew, but I knew there was someone watching that does not know. And so we all always have to be cautious about that. We don't make a completely insider podcast and try to make it open and inclusive. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
actually, no, just funny to say that I do the same thing. Well, actually, in my podcast, we have this trivia section, and I also do the same thing. That I make a like a introduction question about Bitcoin because as you, um, because it's made for Salvadorian Spanish speakers. Maybe there will be a lot of Salvadorians that probably they were hearing by the first time something related to Bitcoin that for us is so obvious, but when we were starting our path, we were like, oh, okay, I didn't know about that. Like just a simple, what is a Satoshi or something like that. And then I have like other two questions. That is one of general culture about uh, anything could be basically. And the other one is about El Salvador, that just the people know a little bit about El Salvador, and it could be like uh, I don't know anything related to El Salvador, and because that's a way that people can learn also not just about Bitcoin but about El Salvador.
yeah. Very, very true. Where can people find you the best? Where can people find your podcast the best? Where can people reach out to you and like get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to basically my Twitter X account. Um, so it's the Juan SC, or you can go to my YouTube channel and just go to Juan Cienfuegos. But if you go to the Twitter, you will see the link and you will see all the platforms where you can watch the show, or you can even DM me. I will reply. I'm very active on Nostr as well and on X. So yeah, but please follow my show as well, guys. I need support as well.
Yeah, definitely. And this will also be like my biggest listener crowd is actually on X on Twitter, and there you are even tagged like in the text above the video, so people can really easily like just click on it and go to your profile. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to releasing it. I think in like 3 weeks. And thank you for being on, and thank you for taking the time, Juan.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.